And we're back. Welcome to Print Your Games, the podcast about what's new and awesome in 3D printing for gamers. I'm your host, Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param, and I'm joined by...
Kristen Howard's also known as Seventh Mastery.
And this episode, y'all, I'm super excited. I've been pumped about this ever since they approached us because y'all have been on my list of want to interviews since about the time we started putting this podcast together. I'm joined by our wonderful guest this time, Austin from the Dragon Trappers Lodge. Hey, Austin!
How's it going? Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank you
Thanks
for
for
coming
coming
on the show. We very much appreciate this. Now, if y'all don't know who Dragon Trappers Lodge is, you all need to go check them out. They make some of the most characterful and awesome and inventive minis that is available for 3D printing space right now. Austin, could you just give us a rundown of what you think Dragon Trappers Lodge is?
Yeah, we kind of what I tell people our tagline is monsters that you won't find in the monster manual. I just like making stuff that's unique and that you're not going to find anywhere else. That's just sort of fun. And we know that as a DM, it can be hard to just homebrew stuff all the time for minis. And so we have stat blocks with everything to just throw all these weird, wacky stuff in your games to make it fun. Last month was like oozes versus mimics. And so we had a whole bunch of all sorts of different types of mimics and oozes, like ballista mimics and catapult mimics and stuff like that. And so stuff like that, that's just fun and unique to throw in a game. So the Ooze King was a free model last month. Yeah. So I'd say that's what we do. Fun monsters and cool characters, I guess.
You actually made me all super happy because my favorite monster type has been on record for years as being slimes. And then to see, and nobody does slimes. I get a slime or two here or there. I get the occasional slime monster makes it into my feed every so often. And then to have this wonderfully crafted and slightly disgusting slime set just drop on my doorstep. I was giddy, I was clapping, I was laughing, I was flooding Kristen with pictures. It was a grand time.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's surprising you don't see more. You're right. There's not like a ton, and I mean they're pretty easy to make compared to stuff like dragons and stuff. But yeah, they're fun.
Yeah. I do love also that it wasn't enough for you all to just do, hey, we can do some amorphous puddles. You've got the Slime King. You've got tons of little slimes. You've got an entire set worth of themed monsters versus mimics. The mimics part was also wonderful. For those of you who didn't catch the set, there was a windmill dragon. You all have a dragon in each of your sets, don't you?
Yeah, that's sort of like our thing. The Dragon Trappers Lodge is like a lodge of fantasy trappers and hunters that basically hunt down dragons and deal with them, whether if they're friendly, negotiate with them if they're a problem, or straight up trap and kill them if they need to, whatever it be. And so we try and do a dragon every single month that fits that theme. And yeah, last month we had a windmill that turned into a giant dragon mimic, and it's very big, but very cool.
I very usually you all have like a terrain, like you have a terrain tier and a miniatures tier. So like there's a lower tier that just gets you the minis, and then a slightly larger tier that gets you the minis and the terrain. I bet the mimic made that a little bit more difficult, didn't it? Because all the mimics were also available as their furniture forms.
Yeah, we're not like super stingy about it. If something feels like it should be in the mini tier because it's kind of technically a mini, then we just will throw it in there. So yeah, usually what's in like the real, because you have like the terrain tier, which is like just terrain, then you have one that's just minis, then you have one that's everything, and the one that's everything we sweeten the deal by putting in like a big mobile lodge type thing every month, which is another one of our trademarks. Is just like large, massive gargantuan size. I mean, really, if you're going old school D&D, like colossal sized monstrosities that have like buildings and structures on their back. And so that's really what you get out of that third tier, is like super huge, cool. I mean, I don't know if you could see on my shelf behind me, but like there's a shelf of them up there on that top shelf of like the snail lodge and the bear and the boar, stuff like that.
Holy crap, those print massive. I've never, like, I've enjoyed your sets for a while now, but I've never had the gumption to try to go for the big lodges because I was like, man, I'm gonna make my printer cry.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the dragons printed, but they're pretty big too. But I hadn't actually seen any of the bigger lodges.
Yeah. All right. So before we dive too much deeper down this rabbit hole of just gushing over the cool minis and models you all make, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got started in the game industry to begin with? Like, what got you into even caring about slime monsters and windmill mimics?
Right. I started playing D&D in high school. We had a friend that introduced us to it and sort of taught us how to play. It was honestly probably not the best introduction, the way he taught it to us, but
Uh-oh.
we pushed past that and sort of learned to love the game more just because of it was still fun, you know. And I'm by trade was a concept artist. I worked at some animation studios doing stuff and freelance and teaching courses online on how to digitally paint, do character design and stuff like that. And yeah, I just love playing D&D. Had gotten a 3D printer and was printing a lot of miniatures and buying a lot of stuff for D&D. And I was like, man, I spent a lot of time on this and it's pretty expensive. I should figure out how to make this tax deductible. And my my big thing is I love dragons. I love monsters. That's really what I love to make the most is creatures and stuff like that. And I'm a really big stickler, not to throw shade at my fellow creators, because I'm a big fan of a lot of people out there. But my big thing that always drives me crazy is when I would see dragons, the wings would always not look anatomically correct. They would always look sort of goofy and cartoony to me. And that, as a personal pet peeve as an artist, just always drove me crazy. And I thought to myself, if I started making dragon minis, I bet I could do an awesome job. Like I can make dragon minis that don't look like anything else out there right now. And then of course Lord of the Print came along and showed me up and they're like, we'll show you anatomically correct dragons. But
Right.
yeah, that's basically how it started. And when I very first started, so I'm a 2D concept artist by trade. And when I started, I was like, well, I'll just sort of teach myself 3D modeling, I'm pretty creative. I think I can pick it up. And so I started and then realized this is going to take a pretty long while till I get to a point where I'm fast enough and good enough to do what I'm envisioning. So instead, I just took a bunch of the money that I had earned from my online courses and started Dragon Trappers Lodge, hired some sculptors, hired a social media manager, and then we just slowly grew from there and started. At the beginning, it was just me doing all the concept art myself and designing everything and coming up with it, and then working as art director with the few sculptors I had hired to start making models. And then yeah, we just kept going, and now we have a handful more concept artists. So that I don't have to do it all myself, especially since in the beginning we were only doing like 5 models a month, and now we're doing like 30 or 40 models a month. And so it was basically like a piece of concept art a day, every single day, nonstop. And it was too much. It was too crazy. So had to hire some more help, but it's been good.
This is something I definitely wanted to chat with you about. It was top of my list. Is I usually divide up the miniature creators out there into 2 tiers. There is the, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm getting this many models tier. And then there's what I call the boutique tier, where I'm only going to get a handful of models, but they're going to be glorious. They're going to be, and like Twin Goddess is like a one I like to point out when I talk about that. I'm only going to get 5 or 6 minis,
Yeah,
but they're going to be like nothing else out there. And
yeah.
for a
Or like
while, I had
Cobra
you
mode.
in, or Cobra mode,
Cobra
yeah.
mode, yeah,
And I
is a
Yeah,
good
had
example.
you, and I would always bring you up in that tier, or Dragon's Trapper's Lodge. You're going to get this cool freaking dragon and some adventurers, but it's going to be the coolest freaking dragon you're going to get that month.
And then
And
there were
so it was
suddenly
like,
more minis. And
yeah,
there were
how
more
did
yeah.
minis.
you were already killing it with the boutique model? What made you all decide to pump up the volume?
Uh, you know, just sheer entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. Were looking at like, okay, how can we, expand? How can we keep growing and compete with some of these other creators that have, a lot of patrons? And one of the things we were looking at is like, well, we could increase our release size, and we were looking at how are they sculpting this many models a month and making it affordable? And just looking at some of our competitors, the main thing I realized is like they're sculpting the same before what you're referring to before when we didn't have as many. It was like a smaller collection and more, you know, honed in. Sculpting like maybe like 13, 14 models a month at that time. And like I mentioned, now we're doing like 30 to 40. And we were looking at our competitors and realizing what they were doing is they were creating iterations and variations of models that they were creating for that month. So like multiple poses, armored versions, non-armored versions, sort of just like expanding on the base models they were creating. And when we counted how many of like the base model they had for each month, it was the exact same we had, which was like 13 or 14 models every month that they were creating and then expanding on. And we were like, well, we should be doing that because, to sculpt a dragon, might cost a certain amount of money, but to take the already sculpted dragon and make 3 more poses out of it, that's only like a tenth of the price, right? Like it's way cheaper to get 3 models out of a single dragon than just getting 1. And so that's basically what we did is we just tried to get really inventive and creative with, okay, how far can we stretch a design to create variations and iterations, right? So if we're going to make like a kitsune, let's use that base kitsune model sculpt and make 3 different armor sets / characters out of that, or like these gator folk, if we're going to make gator folk, let's make multiple, so that's really what we ended up doing. And then just as the Patreon grew, we were able to expand our budget a little bit and just refine our process. I didn't have any background doing 3D modeling, so there was a really steep learning curve when we started, and I didn't know a ton of, like, I knew what I wanted things to look like and I knew how to provide good art direction, but as far as like the technical aspect, I wasn't as experienced. So there's a pretty steep learning curve. And part of that was finding sculptors who knew how to sculpt for 3D printing. Because when we first started, we found some really talented sculptors, but they weren't necessarily adept at sculpting for printing. And I didn't really know how to tell them otherwise. And so at the beginning, things were kind of difficult and wonky, and we sort of honed it as we went. And along with that was also finding sculptors who were fast and could sculpt at the level we needed without breaking the bank. Because, some of the sculptors when we first started were extremely talented, but what our sculpting budget is now, it would be like a third of the sculpting budget for one model, which just is totally not feasible, So, yeah, that's sort of the gist of it. Is we just were like, let's create some iterations of what we have and see how far we can stretch it, and that's how we started doing more. So,
well, it's awesome. And there's also like some utility, like obviously for like the war gamers, they want like the billion poses because they don't need 2 gator folk, they need 30 gator folk. And like the rule in wargaming circles is you need at least 3 different poses to kind of fake that they're not all the same dude. But even as a game master, I appreciate having a bunch of different poses just so that it's like, I'm going to attack the orc. Which orc? The one that's playing the spoons. But you have like the Swamp Man was awesome, actually. Just that was a cool set.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's nice to have a little bit of a horde feel, and have them be sort of unique. And yeah, I'm not a huge war gamer. I have my own little Seraphon army that I printed for Age of Sigmar from Lost Kingdom. They have super cool like Seraphon proxies, but I like to throw a bone out to the war gamers out there, even though if that's not like our main gist. So I think they'll like the December set we have coming up because it's sort of themed with Dragonlance book that's coming out.
Oh, nice.
And it's called the Dragon's War. And we tried to make it a little bit more war gamer friendly with increasing the number of models in a unit and making them feel more like Warhammer units, and then throwing our hero characters in there and stuff like that. So I think I'm pretty excited for that set. It's sort of out there, but are more out there sets actually tend to be pretty popular. It's out there in the sense that I had heard an interview with the creator of Dragonlance, or one of the new writers I hired to revamp it for 5th edition. And he was talking about how they drew a lot of inspiration from World War II era stories and movies, like Saving Private Ryan. And I was like, man, it would be really cool if we made a fantasy set where the characters were like fantasy World War II soldiers, and like their armor and their clothing was sort of like reminiscent of World War II, and they had like artificer style guns, And so that's going to be the set. It's like dragons with like Gatling guns on them, and like siege dragons, like big behemoths with like tanks barrels on their backs and stuff like that. And we're gonna make sure, because there's always people who are like, "Oh, that doesn't really fit in my game." So whenever we do stuff like that, we will also include variants that just have like crossbows and more fantasy type machinery. But
Right.
I'm pretty
Gatling
excited for it
crossbows.
because
Big magical crystals that shoot lightning instead.
I'm excited for that
Awesome.
one just because dragons on guns or guns on dragons, that's just, I don't know. I think it's awesome. So I'm excited for that one.
I mean, like lasers on dinosaurs has been a classic for ages.
Gamma
Exactly.
World, yeah. That's old school.
Yep.
And you all definitely aim for the unique. I've been showing off some of your models for some of our visual from people watching the YouTubes or the live stream, and like you definitely like you don't just do cool dragon. You mentioned Lord of the Print. They do really awesome dragons. We love Lord of the Print stuff. But they're awesome traditional dragons. They're stuff I expect to see on the Elmore painting. You did moss dragons. You did a mimic dragon. You've got a crocodile dragon. Like your
Mushroom
dragons,
dragon.
mushroom dragon. Uh, your dragons are nothing. Like you said, I'm not going to find these in the monster manual. A lot of people that we've talked to think that that's a risk, but you all have kind of embraced models that are completely unique instead of just like doing the easy thing of here's another goblin set, here's another black dragon with horns.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit of a risk. And I mean, there's months where we're like, this is pretty out there. Like, is this one going to work? Is this going to be the one where we flop? But we've done some things to try and sort of mitigate that. One, like I mentioned, is sort of, I try no matter what set I make sure that there's something for everybody as best I can. Because we put it up to a vote every month for our patrons. So we give them 4 options and we say, okay, which one do you want to see the most? So that one, hopefully we're honing in on what's going to actually be the most popular and people actually want to see, because sometimes what the creator wants to make really bad isn't always what's going to do well and what other people are interested in.
Right.
So sort of meet in the middle ground by being like, hey, here's 4 options that we think are really cool. Which one do you want to see the most? And doing so, hopefully hone it in. But make it so that the people who didn't vote for that won, I always try to make sure, like, okay, what's something that, like, even someone who wasn't excited about this theme, if they even just had this one model, they could use it outside the theme and it would still be, like, fun and useful and they could have a use for it. So that's what I try and aim for. And I think it's kind of just become, like, our niche and our trademark to make these sort of fun, charming. I like to say that they're charming. I try and find a lot of charm in the models because I feel like if I can make models that when someone sees it, especially like a DM, I want them to see our models and think, that's so awesome. I have to print that. I have to have that. It's so cool. It's so fun. I actually have some on my desk. A good example of that would be like the pumpkin. That's like the pumpkin beholder.
Yep.
Just making stuff where it's like you see it, you just feel like I gotta print that. It's so fun. So few sets where it's like more generic, and we've put the polls up in the options, like, hey, this set's going to be like generic D&D, elves, dwarves, wizards, rogues, always the worst performing result every time. So
yeah,
we'll stick with what we like doing, which is fun and weird stuff. So
sorry, you read that. Sorry, go ahead, Barrow.
Which I like about your community, because I've seen these like polls go up, and like I'm like a member of like 13 other Patreons and stuff, and like I often see it's just the bread and butter, like it's goblins again, it's orcs, oh we're gonna do vampires, it's the same ones keep winning, and often it'll be the same ones keep winning across 7 of my Patreons, and if I'm not into that theme, I'm like, I really don't need more orcs, guys. But your community goes for it. I don't know what's unique about your community that they just go for the cool, wild stuff. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's just the sort of people we attract. Because I feel the same way. I mean, orcs are cool and goblins are cool and all that stuff. But I kind of feel like I don't know what more we're gonna add to what's already out there. There's tons of super awesome orc models out there. Cards is going to be so much better that it's going to be anything new. Like, I'd rather make stuff that doesn't exist that only Dragon Trapper's Lodge has that you can't find anywhere else, instead of, like you said, adding the 100th orc set to the printing community. So
I was just going to point out you had a really good balance. I mean, you're talking about how they're kind of charming, and I think that's a good word because, like, I know a lot of people like I love Twin Goddess, and Adam does awesome work, but sometimes like I'm like, wow, I want something that's a little like that's I want a monster or something, and like you run that balance between charming, kind of cute, kind of endearing, but also still have some stuff that's creepy and freaky or scary, or I'm put on the board and someone's gonna like suddenly jump back and be like, whoa, what's that? Like that dragon breathing the ghost flame and everything is just killer from last year's Halloween set.
Thank you. Yeah, Morkarth, the big ghost dragon. Yeah, I love that one. It's very scary.
It's such a cool model. And Dusky, the Dino Puncher, is in chat saying that it's all because we are all crazy and want more glow hoppers. Can you please tell me what a glow hopper is?
Yeah, so a glow hopper is a creature that we created actually, let me grab one really quick. I have one on the shelf.
Yeah, that's the glow hopper. And Dusky has a very special connection to glow hoppers, but when he shows his eyes
so much. Oh, you pulled some up right there. Yeah, so those are glow hoppers.
Go ahead.
We created these a while back in our first sort of swamp theme set we did, and they were just sort of these little creatures that live in the swamps that have like these glowing antenna lures, to catch bugs and stuff like that. And we just in the lore had them be sort of these friendly creatures that were known to lead adventurers that were lost, to safety and stuff like that. Sort of like, like dolphins helping out surfers. That was like our glow hoppers. And yeah, they were just pretty popular. People were printing like a ton of them, like probably more than any other model we made. People just were printing a lot of them. And then when we did another swamp set recently this year, I designed the alpha glow hopper, which is like the big one. We only had the small ones at first, and so I made a sort of like the big chunky boy. And once again, they were like super popular. We re-released the old ones with the new set, and yeah, they were a huge hit. And so we started doing recently a collectible glow hopper every month with every set, where you can't get it on My Mini Factory afterwards. You can get it on Tribes, but like it's not going to be available for sale. The only way you can get them is if you're a patron that month it's released, and it's just a glow hopper that fits that theme. So like our the one for this month, which was like Halloween themed, just had like a little witch's hat and like a little pentagram medallion. And the one for next month is like a cyborg because it's sort of Spelljammer set, so he has like mechanical arm and leg and stuff like that. And the month after that is going to be like a dragon one for the dragon set. So that's what glow hoppers are. And yeah, Dusky commissioned us to design some glow hoppers for his wedding. So we did some cake toppers that are one of them has like a little top hat and a bow tie, and the other one has like a little veil and pearl necklace, and they were super cute. So Dusky's like one of our glow hopper fanatics. But yeah, that's what a glow hopper is.
So that's a weird thing. You do commissions for some of your customers?
Yeah, so we offer custom models for people who have that perfect monster in mind, where they're doing their campaign for 3 years. They're ready for that big bad evil monster at the end, and they just want the perfect custom unique mini. We'll work with them. We'll get the concept art made. If they don't have any yet, they can just give us a description, and we'll design some art like we do for our own models. And then once they approve it, get it sent to the sculptors. And then depending on what they're looking for, we can either just send them the file, and we'll get it pre-supported for them like the rest of them, and they can paint it themselves, or we can have one of our painters paint it and just have it shipped. So it's pretty expensive because it's a lot of work to sculpt a model. But if you're like, hey, I got some cash to blow and I want to like really, be the ultimate DM and just have some crazy monster, we can make pretty much anything you can think of. We just tend to try and stay away from just like straight up doing like other IP, like if you want like an anime character or like a movie character and stuff like that. We don't really do that stuff. But if you want it like inspired by that, we can totally do that. But yeah, so Dusky was one of our people. and he just wanted an existing glow hopper just to update it for his wedding. So we're like, yeah, that's easy, let's do it. So, and they turned out good.
Nice.
They're fun.
That
I
is
actually sent you a
awesome.
picture for it, Param. It's in your messenger if you want to grab it.
Oh, Roger.
Sorry.
So while we mentioned that, you mentioned that your tagline is these aren't going to be any monster manuals, but do you have a monster manual with these monsters in it, or am I forced to make these stats myself?
So we do release stats every month for everything we make. So that, like I mentioned, you can just drop them in your game. Yeah, there's the wedding glow hoppers.
It's so awesome.
We do make stats every month. As far as being compiled in a book, we do not have that yet. We plan to do a Kickstarter in the future where we compile everything and a few models that we haven't done stats for yet, like loyalty models and stuff like that, as well as expand it with new models when we release it and sort of flesh out to make a nice, big, thick sort of, monster manual for the world of Dragon Trappers. But that's a ways down the road. The next sort of, as far as stats and lore expansion that we're coming out with, is going to be our first campaign setting, and that's currently being play tested right now by some of our patrons who signed up. And that will be a whole campaign setting within the world of the Dragon Trappers Lodge. It's not specifically about the Dragon Trappers Lodge, but just simply is the setting that the Dragon Trappers Lodge is located in, one of the regions of our world. So that's sort of the next iteration. But at some point, yeah, we'll be compiling sort of like a Dragon Trappers compendium of all the weird, wacky beasts that live in this world that the Dragon Trappers have to hunt down and deal with for people.
So that sounds like some serious Dungeon Master stuff. But earlier you mentioned you had a terrible Dungeon Master as your introduction. Can you tell us why it was bad and what you learned from it that helped you create a world so unique?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it wasn't necessarily that he was a terrible dungeon master. He just had a very specific way of what he thought was a good D&D session and like way to play. And so like when he introduced us to D&D, he was like he was going through like the classes and explaining us to what they were, right? And he would be like, Bard, they're not really good, they don't really do anything. And then we'd be like, okay. And then he'd be like, Cleric, they're like Thor, and we'd be like, okay. And then he'd be like those sort of explanations, and that was our first introduction. So we were just like, okay, bards suck, got it, next. Like,
so he had like a very sort of like player baked in perspective on it,
kind of, yeah. Like it was just like, here's his perspective. And then it was very like hack and slash. So like when the first campaign we ever played in, right, we went through all the classes, and I when I saw the druid, I was like, oh, I gotta play a druid, that's super cool. We were playing 3.5, and so I was like, man, an animal companion, being able to turn into animals and like do all these cool spells, and like that sounds awesome. So I was a druid. However, and I built my character all around nature and trees and stuff like that, but he wouldn't tell us what the campaign was going to be about. He's like, it's a secret. And then the whole campaign was straight Underdark. He had like a map that was like this big, that was like the Underdark, and the whole entire campaign was just about being in the Underdark. And my druid was almost useless. There was no plants down there, very little for me to interact with. And I mean, now that I'm more experienced, I know I could have probably found some other ways to be useful as a druid underground. But my perception of what a druid was and what had been explained to me is like, you're like a nature guy, you're out in the trees and stuff. And so it was just like, meh, it was very much, there was almost actually literally no story and no character development or anything like that. It was just really just like, you go in here and you're going to kill everything I throw at you, sort of thing, which it was still fun enough for us to be like, let's do it. So later in life, that guy ended up becoming my roommate, and ended up like he like was like it was crazy. He wanted to like murder me and stuff. It was insane. He got institutionalized. Wow. I got out of there. So despite everything fighting against me, that's how great of a game I think D&D is, that I was still like, I don't care about all that. This game's awesome.
After that onboarding experience, you were still down for it. Got it. Yeah, that's impressive.
I was expecting pretty much standard tell me about your campaign talk, not a Dateline special.
Yeah. So
it sounds like now you're playing 5e, is that correct?
Yeah, I was pretty reluctant to switch. I was like, we had just played 3.5 for so long. I didn't even bother with fourth edition because I heard bad things about it. And fifth edition, when it came out, I kind of glanced at it when it first came out, and I was like, "Puh, garbage! No prestige classes. What is this for babies?" And I was just like, "No, thank you. I'll take my numbers and calculators and breaking the game." But I eventually, because we were making our own campaign setting, we were making it for 3.5, and sort of reluctantly we were like, dude, if we're going to sell this to anybody, we got to do it in fifth edition. Like, we just got to suck it up and do it. And so started playing in fifth edition, learning more about it. And then it wasn't too long before I was like, okay, yeah, this is better. Fifth edition is definitely the way to go, I think, at least for our play group. So, well, I don't remember your question was now. What did you ask me?
You're answering it. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. Going off on
just
tangent.
yeah, no, you're it's funny. We have very similar experiences, and I think both Param and I probably had a slight detour from 3.5 through Pathfinder First Edition, but then both of us have been playing some 5e in addition to that lately. So
Yeah, I started getting curious about Pathfinder when we were doing 3.5, but then I ended up starting doing 5th edition, and then I just never went down that road. But Pathfinder always looked interesting. I was always curious. So
very cool.
I'm curious what your team looks like. So, what does the Dragon Trappers team look like? Or is it just you? Are you
So
just carrying this whole thing?
no, I mean at the beginning it was kind of like that. It was me and just like a few sculptors, but we ended up growing pretty quickly and doing well. At the beginning, as like a side tangent, it was just me for the most part. And so like to get it going, I was like, I knew I need to spread this out there. I need to get awareness. So like when I launched the Patreon, I was sharing it everywhere I could. And then I was messaging every single Etsy seller I could find that was selling miniatures, like hundreds. I'm not even kidding you, hundreds of Etsy sellers, and being like, "Hey, my name's Austin. I just started a new Patreon. Here's the link to it. I have an early bird tier for a merchant. Would you like to join?" And maybe like 5% of those people joined, but that was like my first like 30 merchants, and merchant tier is like 20, $25 for my early bird. That was like a couple $100 my first month, and that was enough to be like, all right, let's do this, and sort of snowball it from there. But as we got bigger, and we increased the model size, I brought on my best friend Drew. I hired him to do social media marketing, and eventually he became a partner of the company, part-time part owner. And then we brought on Marcus, who Drew is no longer with the company. He left on good terms and stuff, but he just went on to do other things. So now it's me and Marcus. We both own the company. Marcus does all sort of like the finance stuff, like making sure our sculptors and artists and everyone gets paid, and managing like our budget. And then I'm the creative director, so designing models every month, coming up with the themes and what we're going to do, making sure the renders get made, all of that, all that stuff. And then Mitch is our product manager. He sort of runs the community, sort of kind of like what you do, Param. Mitch sort of runs the community. He is responsible for making sure the models get uploaded. Excuse me, uploaded correctly. And
That's not easy. That is not
it
as
is not
easy as it
easy.
sounds.
Especially
Yeah,
with
it's
my mini factory lately.
yeah,
Oh,
especially with
God.
my manufacturer. I was gonna say, especially when you have websites that don't always work the way they're supposed to. But yeah, Mitch does all of that stuff and managing things like this. He set up this whole introduction between the two of us and cross motion. So that's Mitch's role. And then we have Aaron, who runs our social media. He does all that stuff besides the TikTok. I do the TikTok just because I have experience with it from, like I said, I make online courses on digital painting, and so I had done TikTok and YouTube and stuff like that to garner attention. So I've been running the TikTok. He runs, so Instagram, Facebook, everything else. And then we have a whole team of artists and sculptors. So we have kind of depends because we have a lot of contractors. So like month to month, like some might be busy a certain month. And so we don't work with the same every single month, but usually it's roughly the same, about like 6 to 7 sculptors every month. And then like me and one other concept artist for the most part. Um, Sometimes with months that are busy where we're just behind, I'll work with some other contractors to get some art done, or David Norton, who's sort of a friend of the company, he designed our Skyback Lodge, which is like a massive whale with a building on its back that flies. It's not released yet, but we're working on it. He designed that, and we'll work with him sometimes, but only sometimes because he is very, 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 very good, but very, 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 very expensive. So worth every penny, though.
That's awesome.
And do you see the company continuing to grow? Or are you happy with
Yeah,
where you're at?
so no, we definitely would like to continue growing. While we are doing pretty good and we make a good, I mean, we make a decent amount of money every month. Right now, I mean, a good number of our sculptors who are doing a lot of models every month are making more money than I am from this thing. I'm not making a whole lot right now. Mostly living off of all the money I make from my online courses. And I would like it to get to the point where I am living off of this, considering I do, all my full time work is working on Dragon Trap Lodge stuff, which I love. I love doing this. It's the best job ever. But I would like to make more money from it. So yeah, we plan to continue to grow. It's trending upwards. It's doing pretty good, especially with the convention we just ran and stuff like that. Finding ways to improve. We have some cool stuff I think planned in the future. So yeah, I think we're going to keep growing and doing stuff like this, as well as working with YouTube content creators and stuff like that to just get our name out there more. I think one thing that sets apart some of the bigger, sort of like business talk type stuff, one of the things that I think from what I've observed that sets apart some of the really big creators like Loot Studios, Archulent Games, One Page Rules, is you guys just do a lot more marketing and really set aside a substantial amount of money to run towards ads and sponsored videos and stuff like that. And so that's what we're going to follow in the footsteps of and really try and get Dragon Trapper's name out there and in front of people, because I think that's honestly the biggest reason we don't have more patrons isn't because we don't have something good to offer, because we have great value and I think our models are
Yeah.
really great. I think we just need to get out there to more people so people know about us, because if you're really hard into the community, you kind of have tabs on all the creators out there, even the smaller ones, like you are aware of them because you see their stuff everywhere.
Right.
And so sometimes you assume that everyone who's into 3D printing also is the same way. But unless you're really into it, there's a lot of people who are just sort of casually invested in it. And they're like, I've never even heard of you. There's a ton of people at FanX who are like, yeah, I 3D print D&D miniatures all the time. I have tons of them. I've never heard of you. And in my head, I was like, man, we need to be doing way better job marketing if there's people who are in our niche who are, pretty heavily invested in, they don't even know who we are. To me, that just tells me okay, there's definitely a market for us to grow. We just got to get out in front of those people more. So that's a strategy next. And hopefully we do grow. So.
Right. And that really is tragic because, just straight honesty here. I think that your team is producing in the top 10 of quality and value available in the industry right now. Y'all are killing it.
Well, and such a consistent vibe, and it feels like a persistent world. There's some lore there. I know a lot of creators we have on here, and they're just kind of slapping together lore every month. And it's not an offense to them, just how they operate, because that's not their focus. But it literally feels like there's a story going on in every set, and that it's evolving. And I think people will really bite into that if you can get that next kind of awareness chunk in their minds.
Right.
Yeah,
there are creators that give me what I need for my games every month, and then there are creators like you who make me need to have an excuse to use their models because they're that awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna my players are going to run into the hand house. I don't know when, I don't know how, but the hand house is to show up now.
Yep, that's our goal, is to make those models you didn't know you needed until you saw them, and then you're like, I gotta have that. That's got to be in my game. So I appreciate it. That's a great compliment. Thank you.
So, what do you think about the industry of the 3D printing industry and how it's grown the last couple of years? How do you think it's going to really continue to change the gaming market going forward?
That's a good question. When we started, we've been going for about 3 years now, and when we started, there was not nearly as many creators as there were now. I think we got in at a good time. I don't know if Dragon Trevor's Lodge would be as big as it is now if we had started like a year or two later, because I see creators out there that honestly I see some of their models. I'm like, dang, those are better than some of the ones we made this month. But they're just so saturated now. It's a lot harder to like really get a foothold, I think. Um, and so, one, I think it's really saturated now. There are a lot of creators making miniatures, and especially like you said, making a lot of the same stuff: orcs, knights, goblins, stuff like that. Um, and so I don't know if it's going to sort of like burst a little bit and maybe like come back down to where there's not as many, or if it's just going to keep going. Because I mean, you can only have there's only so many models you can really print, or need before you're just like, I got everything I need. Like I don't really need to keep going. So I don't know. Maybe it will come back down. I think D&D seems to be getting more and more popular as a whole, and printers are getting better and better quality and more user friendly, and less, that you need to tinker with them and do all this work to even get something decent. They're getting easier to use, and I'm guessing they'll probably become cheaper, in the long run. So hard to say. As a creator, it's definitely saturated, and you really have to fight. Which personally, I'm I'm okay with. I think the competition really pushes the market to make better and better stuff and better offerings and cooler things. And I like it. I feel like it really pushes us to, when I see uh, models from some of our competitors, like I really like Bite the Bullet when I see the stuff they put out. I'm like,
Hmm.
all right, we got to up our game. Like they're doing some great work. Like we gotta match that, like really push the envelope on creativity and quality and stuff like that. So I support it. I'm here for it. Hopefully it keeps growing and continues to get bigger. We're pretty excited for like the D&D movie coming out. I think that's going to give D&D as a whole a huge boost. And so hopefully we can have some more offerings for physical models up and ready to go on things like Only Games and stuff by the time that comes around to really capitalize on it. But yeah, that's what I think. We'll see what happens.
Well, one of the things you mentioned earlier was like uh, one of the sets you had coming up uh, later, and being able to pivot on, hey, this cool idea came out, and you're able to have, like you say, you're like taking polls of what sets you're going to do about like a month ahead of time or 2 months ahead of time.
Hmm.
Whereas in traditional manufacturing, like when I've worked with like traditional publishing companies, that's like a year, 2 years,
Right.
like 6 months, 18 months. It would not be abnormal for a new line of miniatures to show up, and you're able to do it in a month. So like, I'm like, when you looked at, for instance, when the D&D trailer dropped, and then a slew of awesome owl bears hit that very month, or when
Right.
when Games Workshop announces Space Dwarves are coming back, and then like I'm flooded with Space Dwarf models months before
Right.
GW's Dwarves even hit the shelf.
Right.
Yeah, it's a wild industry right now.
Well, I thought your
Yeah, it is.
astrolodge. Sorry, go ahead. Your
I was just gonna say, yeah, it's sort of when you're competing with big companies like WizKids or Games Workshop, you really have to leverage what strengths you do have as a small company. And one of them is that one, you can kind of explore the niche of things. You don't have to. You can take bigger risks, because you don't have such huge company riding on it. But two is that yeah, you can be way more nimble and come up with ideas and get them out and produced a lot quicker. You kind of have to, right? Like it sometimes it feels almost like breakneck how fast we have to go because, like you mentioned, we run the poll and then we have 1 month to do all the concept art and then another month after that to do all the sculpting and then the set is live, which is it might seem like a long time to someone who's
no,
not
that
in the
is not a
production side of
long
things,
time.
but for like 30 to 40 models, it's insanity sometimes at how fast we have to go to get things out. And
Yeah,
that's
I've
not on
done.
top of like, if we're doing conventions or any other side projects, Kickstarter, stuff like that. So,
Yeah, I've done art direction before, and just even getting the turnaround of concept art to first render to final in that time frame, that is tight. That is
Yeah.
spooky tight. So
Yeah.
good on you for keeping it up.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had another Spelljammer set coming out, because I thought your Astral Lodge was kind of your Spelljammer set. So there's more.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Astral Lodge was sort of like our Lovecraftian horror set, is
Yeah,
what that
but
was supposed to be.
sure.
Our Spelljammer set, it's called Journey Through the Astral Sea, because I mean, let me set the record straight. Not Spelljammer, nothing like it. Totally unique.
Oh
But
yeah.
Journey,
Wink, wink.
yeah, Journey Through the Astral Sea is sort of our take on Spelljammer, and we sort of flavored it with some heavy inspirations from Treasure Planet, the animated movie
Nice.
by Disney.
Mm.
So it's sort of like pirates in space, is our take, and it's coming out next month. We were a little bit behind the curve because I was like, are we gonna do anything for it? But it was just like super popular, and people were like, please do it, and we're like, okay, we'll make it. So ours is coming out next month, and I am pretty excited. I'm excited for every set that comes out because I'm always like, it's gonna be so cool. But yeah, this one has like a whole pirate crew of like, we got a bunch of like hippo folk, or like basically GIF with alternate versions, so you can make them rhino folk or elephant folk. So we have like a
Awesome.
much wider range. We have like bug people, we have monkey people, we have more ooze people. We have like an ooze captain with like a little French captain's hat and like little shoulder pads with the tassels hanging off, and fun stuff like that. We have like astral elves. We have people on hoverboards. But the thing that I'm super excited about is that we have a 2-scale space whale. We also make really big models quite often. And I've seen people make space whales, but they're all like maybe like this big. But in the book, it says they're 80 feet long. So we made
Yep.
ours accurate to D&D scale. It's like this big. So it's going to be a 2-scale space whale. And then the big thing we're making several sort of like spaceships, like Spelljammer ships. And one of them, called the Indignitary, which is basically, lovable pirates of the lodge sent out into space, is going to be about 4 feet long with playable layers, interiors and stuff like that. It's going to be
4 feet.
very, very big and awesome. So yeah, that's our actual Spelljammer set that's coming out next month. So
Okay,
I'm excited.
they need to fix that, because I was only on terrain tier last month and I missed some of the minis last time. So like now I've got to get upgraded again.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
So let's talk a little bit about this month's set, because me and Kristen had a little bit of a chat a couple episodes back. It was like, Halloween's coming, brace for the vampires and the zombies. Y'all didn't bring me you brought me a little bit of zombies, but you all have a really cool Halloween set. Can you tell a little bit about it and why the pumpkins have jack-o'-lantern cannons?
Yeah. So in the past, Halloween's just done really well for us. Our sort of weird vibe just jams really well with people who like Halloween. More classic Halloween, like spooky, instead of like, like you said, vampires and werewolves sort of thing. And so last year, we had the pumpkin and some other stuff, and this year we put up the poll, and I put some options. I put werewolves versus vampires. I put zombie apocalypse. I put sort of like a harvest horror theme, and then the last option, which was sort of a Hail Mary that I thought would be the most fun to do, but I was like, this might be too weird. Like, it's going to be way too out there, and I didn't even know what to call it. So in the poll, I just put Halloween Weird World. And I was basically like, this set, exactly what it would be, but it would be sort of just weird, spooky Halloween inspired, like a mix of like Nightmare Before Christmas vibes, Addams Family vibes, Young Frankenstein, just sort of like a fun, weird Halloween set, Beetlejuice feel, And I was like, that's all I can tell you about it. I don't know exactly what's going to be in it, but that's what we're going to aim for if this one wins. And everyone picked that one. No one cared about werewolves or vampires or zombies. They were like, that one. Whatever that is, that's what we want. And so, yeah, that's what we made. And for those of you who aren't patrons, this is a super good month to sign up, because as a bonus, we re-released last year's Halloween set as an entire throwback. So you get like 100 models this month.
Good gracious.
And it's got all this super fun stuff, giant disembodied hands, and the burlap sack sort of monster guys, and it's
this
awesome.
Guy, right,
it's super fun.
The large burlap sack guy with the claws is like on the top of my print list right now.
He has. I didn't expect him to be that popular, but he's been the number one most printed model from the set so far, and people have painted him a lot. So I'm always surprised at which ones people pick. But the thing that I think is really cool this month, which we have our painter Alan painting up and to show off near the end of this month, is we created a modular Franken dragon, and so like you can kind of see it there in the picture next to the house hand. But that dragon can it has like five different options each for like the head, the arms, the wings, and the tail, and you can make like a horrifying Frankenstein monstrosity where you can put whatever you want attached to it, and all the options are magnetized with like magnet holes. So you can add your magnets in there and make whatever you want, and I love it. I think it's awesome. You can see some of the suggestions our patrons put that they wanted to see, like the fist head. They were like, we want. I made one of the options just to be like human arms on its back, and they were like, you should make a human arm tail. So then we made a tail that was just like a big bodybuilder arm. They're like, you should make a head that's a hand. And so one of the builds you could do is just all hands, and the stat block's really fun because it can just like grab people and throw them, or the head can just like flick people and send them flying and stuff like that. It's super fun. I think that was probably my favorite from the set.
I would stand Punch Dragon. Yeah, absolutely.
Dusky says it takes 132 magnets. Is that accurate?
If you want to get, so there are 25 modular options plus the body, and then each one has multiple magnet spots so that it can be nice and sturdy. So if you want to magnetize every single possible option and the body and everything, it's 132 total. But if you're just going to do one set of magnets, it's like a fifth of that. So
gotcha. That's amazing.
2 packs of magnets just to get this dragon done. Worth it.
It's pretty cheap. You can get 300 magnets. They're 1 millimeter by 3 millimeters the size. You can get 300 of them for like $7 on Amazon.
Oh dang, Roger.
So yeah, find a friend who print it, and you guys can split it.
I don't need to find a friend. Oh yeah. So we are coming up on time. I could keep chatting with you for another hour, but we are out of time. Okay, so first off, y'all got a great Patreon. Y'all on Tribes, y'all on My Mini Factory. You've got Only Games going, so to order prints. What else can you shout out to?
I mean, honestly, you pretty much covered all of it. We would love if you guys backed us and supported us. The community is growing, and now's a great time. We're trying to offer as much value as possible. What we have coming up next is, if you follow us on social media, we have a Kickstarter coming up. We don't have an exact launch date yet. It's our first Kickstarter, so we just want to make sure it goes smoothly. So we're kind of getting it approved and everything before we finalize the exact day. But it's going to be a Kickstarter called Chonkers and Chalices, and it is all about versions of classic D&D monsters. I think you showed one of the art from our Instagram earlier of the big chonky beholder.
Yep.
It's going to be sort of boss style monsters like that, a unique, very character driven monster that each one comes with their own sort of one shot module for, braving the dungeon of Brunhildax, the big beholder. We have a beholder. There's going to be a dragon. There's a bulldog hydra that's super thick and chunky. So it's going to be fun. And that's coming up sometime probably next month. Like I said, I don't have an exact date, but if you follow us on social media and stuff, you can see when that launches. So yeah.
And you said you might have a shout out for some wanting to grow your team.
Oh yeah. We are currently looking for another concept artist and another sculptor or two. As far as the concept artist goes, we have creature artists. We need some character artists. So if you're good at drawing D&D characters, shoot us an email at admin@dragontrapperslodge.com. Send your portfolio. We'll take a look at it. And then we also need the opposite. We need sculptors who can do creatures. It's pretty easy to find sculptors that can do humans really well, but it's surprisingly difficult to find sculptors who can do creature anatomy well. The tendency kind of seems to be that like you learn human anatomy, but then when people do creatures, they just sort of make like a human on all fours but that's not quite like creature anatomy. You know, we need people who can like really kind of understand it. So, yeah, if you're a sculptor and you know creatures, send us your portfolio. And if you're a 2D artist who do characters, send us your portfolio. And then one last shout out. I just want to shout out, give some love to my favorite Patreon out there right now, which is Cobra Mode. I am such a fanboy for Cobra Mode. Everything they put out, I'm just like, oh, it's so cool. I love the stylization and the themes, and like I especially love Asian themes for campaigns and stuff like that, and like other Asian stuff. I just like die over. So shout out to Cobra Mode. Throw some love their way, and yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah.
So
And for any of our listeners who missed our Cobra Mode interview, it's one of our better ones. You can go find that back in our backlog or over on our website at printergames.com or over on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/param or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/printergames or twitter.com/printergames. Make sure you go check out Dragon Trappers Lodge. They're awesome. They need more patrons because they need to grow, and I need more of their monsters in my life. So make sure that keeps happening.
Space whales.
Space whales. I got to see the space. I'm gonna have to just break down and print one of the big giant chonkers because gosh, those like seeing that snail on your shelf. Like, how do you? I'm gonna run out of shelf.
okay, grab
is what's
it.
gonna
I
happen.
can grab it. Really
Yeah,
quick.
bring me
Grab
the
it.
snail.
Grab it. Let's see
Bring
it.
me the snail.
Bring the
I
snail.
want to see the snail.
I'm also super
It's
excited for
actually-
4-foot Spelljammer myself. Also, that's exciting. Holy
It
cow,
needs
that's
to-
big. That's
it
even
needs-
bigger than I thought it was.
Holy
It
crap!
needs a few. It needs a few repairs because when I was transporting it back from FanX, we had it there at our display booth, and it tipped over in the back of my car. There was a fish hanging off this arm on the front that was supposed to be like a lure for the snail. I gotta glue it back on. And a few things broke, but here's the fish right
For
here.
our audience listeners, it's taking him 2 hands to hold it
This is
up.
a-
The fish itself would be the size of an ogre. The entire piece looks
Yeah.
like it would eat the USS Flag if it was going for it.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty. This actually isn't even the biggest one that we've done as far as lodges go. This is just the biggest one I have here at my house painted. The
And
biggest
it's
one
very
we
well
did was.
painted. Did you paint these yourself?
Thank you. I don't paint all of them myself, but I did paint this one myself.
Yeah, this looks nice.
You do not need to show us,
Um,
but does that have playable interiors too?
That one does not.
Okay.
It was quite a beast to get done in 2 months, and playable interior just didn't happen for that month with the time crunch. But some of them do. The ones we can, I try and do the best I can to get those with playable interiors, but that one doesn't. The biggest one we did was earlier this year in March, I think, and it was like a ginormous sea turtle with basically a whole town on its back, and you could switch out modular options for if you want like watchtowers or huts and whatever, weapons dealers and stuff like that. That's the biggest one we've done, but I don't have that one. So
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming. We hope that everybody checks out your wonderful creations and that we get to continue seeing more of it. Until next time, I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
I'm Kristen Sowards, 7th Mastery, and don't forget to use a screen protector.
And we'll see you all next time.